Hi, everyone. Good evening. Carl Steinbeck here. Just want to talk on Jen McCabe, one of the most instrumental key witnesses in this murder trial of Boston police officer John O'Keefe. And what we have is Jen McCabe, one of the key witnesses for the prosecution. And what I'm covering is part 2 of her cross-examination. In part 1, we saw a lot of flip-flopping, a lot of things that didn't add up. And there's more of that coming up here that we'll cover. There's a lot of stuff also going on the last several days since we did the last live stream on Sunday night. And I'm not going to get into all that right now, but I do want to follow up on some other issues later. I will say that we've watched the ID Discovery channel, which had the, what is it called? A Body in the Snow. And there's 5 series to that. So upon looking at that, it sort of supports my notion that it's never a good idea to put your client in the news to have her give statements or him give statements. There's just always a downside to that. So there's a couple things in there that's like, oh, I wish as a client, I wouldn't like to have that being played out, especially if there's a second trial. I think that what they thought was that there's no way there's going to be a hung jury. So why not just let the ID Discovery film crew and producers follow them around and see how they're preparing for trial and whatnot. So my whole thing is, never promote publicity for your client, your defense. Make as short as few statements as possible. So, do I think there's anything that's damaging there that's really going to hurt her? No, I don't think so. And I think people either can like her or dislike her, have no really a strong opinion one way or the other. And I would say I'm in that camp. I don't have a strong opinion one way or the other. I'm just looking at the evidence, and what I'm trying to give you is an honest feedback. I'm not on the free Karen Reed bandwagon. I'm not on the pro prosecution bandwagon. I'm just telling you based on my almost 35 years of experience on being both a prosecutor and defense counsel, doing so many trials that I just really feel like I have a good read on evidence. That's what I'm trying to share with you. So if you do want to disagree with anything I'm saying, that's fine. Just be professional and respectful. I'm not calling anybody names at any time. So I hope you guys don't do that as well. The format I try to have is that basically I'm going to talk as if we're in a court of law in front of a judge or jury. And so anyway, yeah, I see a motion filed by the Commonwealth today. Let me just say this before we get into this prosecutor is just absolutely out of control. I mean, out of control. This is like scorched earth, doing everything he can that makes no sense whatsoever, except you're willing to get a conviction at any and all costs, to include stuff that's automatically going to be reversible error. Okay, so that's how much they're out for blood. They're going for the jugular on Karen Reed. They're going after her attorneys, and it is absolutely scorched earth. And even if you think Karen Reed is guilty, the way they're going after her and trying to get stuff suppressed and kept out, expert testimony suppressed, kept out, the theory of who did the crime, the third party culprit, they're trying to keep out. I mean, they're just going on and on and on. You really have no defense if you just capitulate to what the prosecution wants. You can't point the finger at somebody else. You can't bring an expert to say, no, this physically couldn't have happened. I mean, it's just like so ludicrous and outrageous. So anyway, yeah, I've seen some of that Morrissey video. Thrilled you're asking about that. So I don't want to get into that tonight. I think there'll be another night, maybe Sunday night, we can talk about that. And I'll just sort of do some snippets of different things that the Commonwealth is doing. But I'm just like, the one good thing about it, because my blood boils when I see injustice of any kind. I don't care how guilty the defendant is. When a prosecutor is resorting to ambush tactics and just basically cut them off every way you can, you're not even trying to look at doing this as a fair trial. And that's the ironic thing is, I've never heard a prosecutor say as much about a fair trial for the government. The Constitution requires a fair trial for the defendant. There's nothing in there about the government having a fair trial, right? Now, there are rules of a procedure in place that can apply to both prosecution and defense, but it's a fundamental Sixth Amendment constitutional right to present a defense. And so the prosecution, from what I'm seeing, just does not care about any of that. They're out for blood. And so I do have some concerns that with a judge like this, that she's just going to be granting too many of these prosecution motions. And, if you can't, that's the whole thing. If you get evidence kept out, it can make the difference between winning and losing. Like, for example, those ARCA experts, prosecution tried to keep them out. They couldn't. They also were able to successfully, though, keep out the fact that they were hired by the FBI. That is huge. The only reason they didn't want that brought out because they know that gives them instant credibility with the jury. That's the only reason why the prosecution wanted that kept out. Okay, that should be releasable now. The FBI is done with them. That should come out now. Is the judge going to allow it? I don't know. I mean, it's really scary to see a prosecutor and judge so much one-sided, and it's not about fairness and justice anymore. It's about vengeance and just trample over the Constitution to get there. So that's my little opening diatribe on that. So, like I say, it's really scary that the prosecution can act this out of control, wielding this much effort to try to silence and squelch any reasonable defense. So we'll talk more about that. And like I say, these folks that are anti-Karen Reed, if you think this kind of justice system is what's good for America, you're sadly mistaken. And I can say, if Karen Reed was a relative of theirs, they would not be talking that at all. Okay, they'd be totally on board with this being a railroad job. So, that's one of the things people ask me, that, how can you be a defense lawyer defending the guilty? It's like, well, what if you're innocent? Have you ever thought about that? I could get an innocent client. And, I sometimes throw a scenario out there like, well, what about, you're telling me if your son or daughter was arrested for something, DUI, and the prosecutor wanted to stick them in jail for 6 months, you'd say, don't hire a defense lawyer. Let's just do the 6 months. Prosecutor knows what's best for the society. We'll just rely on what the prosecutor says for your punishment. Heck no, you wouldn't do that. You'd be dialing me up saying, hey, we got to fight this rogue prosecutor. They're out of control. So it's all a matter of perspective. And have you actually had to walk through the shoes of somebody else? So, and yeah, it is about fairness and justice for John O'Keefe as well, because they're really botching it up. They're really screwing it up. They're trying to suppress the truth. When I see a prosecutor trying to actively suppress the truth from coming out, it is absolutely an outrageous, disgusting thing to see, and it makes my blood boil. So yeah, I think that the prosecutor, combined with Judge Canone, you'll not find a worse example in America of justice gone sideways. Okay, that's my honest assessment of it. It really has me sort of wondering, are they going to, the defense counsel going to be able to even present a defense the way this thing has gone so out of control? And now they're also trying to get attorney-client privilege matters that are between Karen and Dave Yannetti, or the initial attorney there, the local attorney in Boston. I mean, that is so bizarre. You could talk to any prosecutor in America. They would never try to do something like that just because she went on ID Discovery and said she called up her attorney and used that as a basis to find out exactly what they said through text messages and whatnot. So anyway, I would just say it's the only silver lining I see in this right now from the big picture is people can see how bad justice can really be. It's not about justice, and it's all about getting convictions. So in any event, yeah, I hear Maya Rodriguez Sorensen saying that you're thinking through the retired North Carolina trooper. Thank you for your inputs as well. If you want to give us your name so I don't have to just call you the retired North Carolina officer, that'd be fine, but I'll leave that up to you. You say here, Maya says, I represent officers in civil rights lawsuits. They all say this investigation was the worst. Yeah, it's not even an investigation, and then the judge, they have to explain to the judge why having an expert FBI witness talk about why this investigation was botched. You really have to have an argument in front of a judge. I mean, any normal judge And any normal prosecutor would not even be fighting this, right? It's just an automatic thing that you see happening in criminal trials. You bring in experts to refute the government's way of handling the case. And so for this even to be argued and under advisement now by the court, it's so preposterous. So, all right, so let's go ahead and get started here. Let me adjust the screen. And this is right around where we left off on Sunday night. Hopefully I'll do a better job here managing this technical stuff. I think I got it on. There's full screen.
2 seconds. Yes. Do you recognize the voice on that tape?
Yes, that's mine.
It appeared to be a true and accurate, at least that portion, a true and accurate reporting of the 911 call that you made that morning.
It was a very brief clip. I'd have to hear more.
Let's go ahead and play starting at runtime 1:30 to about runtime 1:45.
46 years old.
46, how long has he been outside?
I don't know. I don't know. He's been out of the car.
Was that you?
Yes, it was.
Is that the 911 call?
Yes, it was.
And what did you just say?
I said, I don't know. He got out of the car.
He got out of the car,
Mhm.
is what you said, correct?
Yes,
And this was at 6:03 in the morning, correct?
correct.
This is before.
You know what? Where's the desperation to get an ambulance there in that? I don't hear any desperation, any plea for immediate help. Where's she saying this is an officer friend of mine who I love? Hurry, you know, she should be screaming. All she does is talk about Jen, really screaming about that. And, you know, it's just really, I think a real important clue that a jury should pick up on is that she's not having the appropriate response to the condition John is found in. Is not appropriate. Similar to like what we have for Wendy Adelson, where her response to finding out that her ex-husband had been murdered is not appropriate. And so if it's not appropriate, it begs the question, what's really going on behind the scenes?
Before you ever talked to Brian Albert,
Correct.
before you ever talked to your sister Nicole Albert,
Correct.
before you ever talked to Chris Albert,
Correct.
before you ever talked to Julie Albert,
Correct.
you didn't talk to anybody at this point other than Carrie Roberts, correct?
And Karen Reed.
And my client.
Correct.
And in that 911 call, you said he got out of the car, didn't you?
I did, because Karen Reed had told me that she had left him there.
Your words were, he got out of the car, correct?
Correct.
Did you make any other calls other than to 911?
I called my sister.
What time was that?
I believe it was after the 911, but I'm not sure.
You claim that your sister didn't answer, is that right?
She did not answer.
But you do know.
Her body language indicates she is very ticked off. She doesn't like this line of questioning, and it's bothering her because she's got to come up with some answers, right? If you really got to think through your answers, you can be more relaxed about it. She's not coming across as relaxed enough. She's coming across very tense. And that's often a sign that somebody is like knowing that they got to try to have a good enough memory to fill in all these kind of details. And they're not going to line up. So if you got a different script to follow, that's what causes a stress. If under a lot of stress, the person that's trying to not give the straight answers, they're the ones that have all the stress. Somebody being honest, they're more freely mentioning things. So she's very tight-lipped. Notice the way she says correct. It's very, very scripted, and she has some anger to this. Like, how dare you have me here? But you know what? The bottom line is she's the one that made that call. And let's see, does he bring out the fact that she doesn't sound very excited that this is the man? Remember in direct examination, she said this is a man she loves, John O'Keefe. So she just refers to it as a body's found in the side of the road here. I mean, none of this is adding up.
Know that your phone extraction shows that was an answered call at 6:07.
If that's what it shows, but I can tell you she did not answer the phone.
And you are sure about that as you are, my client said, I hit him 3 times. right?
I certainly am, yes.
Perfect. You also called her at 6:08.
I might have called her twice, yes.
Your Honor, I have an exhibit. This may be as good a time as any to take a break. If you wish, I just have to cue it up. It's up to you. I don't mind.
Folks, we'll take morning.
This may be as good a time as any to take a break. If you wish, I just have to cue it up. It's up to you. I don't mind.
Folks, we'll take morning.
Where did she say it's a police officer? I mean, that really get the folks there, right? So don't call anybody a sociopath. We're trying to avoid having a name here. Yeah, that's a good point, officer. Yeah, here's a point, Kate. That's the one I was making. You're saying another way.
May be seated.
So,
think
Mr.
you said
Jackson, when you said
after
it's
a
an exhibit,
man-
is it in evidence?
It's not.
Okay.
Asked to market. It's a digital
Unresponsive in the
recording
snow,
of
I think is the
4-minute
exact phrase.
voicemail on John O'Keefe's phone. It does include the 911 call. I don't want to play the entirety of the 911 call, but I do want to play the entirety of this particular 4-minute voicemail.
Okay. Do you know what it is, Mr. Lally?
I do.
Okay. So is there an agreement that it's coming?
This is a good point. Carrie Johnson saying, I have many questions for you, but one thing I want to ask is how on earth no one has paid attention to the timelines for the witnesses versus Karen John timelines. Yeah, I'm going to get into that because there's the timelines here really help Karen Reed. If you follow the digital trail of texting and calls, that really helps Karen, and I'll explain more later.
In?
There's no objection to it.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you.
I just needed to know if it would make sense for me to review it if there was an objection.
Thank you.
All right, to the court, please.
Hey there, Karen Reed trial watchers. This is a law and crime.
Good. Sorry. Looks like around 229 here. We're back.
Okay. Whenever you're ready, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you, Your Honor. Ms. McCabe, I want to go back very briefly to something you said just before we broke, and that was in respect of the statements that you attribute to my client out of the scene. You said, well, there was an officer possibly asking questions, or it could have been a female EMT, and I wasn't answering questions about that, correct? Hence, you didn't say, I hit him, I hit him, I hit him.
Can you be clear on your question?
Let me rephrase that. Before we broke a few minutes ago, you had said, the reason I didn't say,
That's right, Greg.
I hit him, I hit him, I hit him, is because I was never asked. And the subject never came up about what an officer asked her when she declared that. So I just didn't offer it. And then you said, or it could have been an EMT.
Yes, I'm unclear who was there.
Isn't it true that at the grand jury, the question that was posed to you, and this is counsel page 208, grand jury. The question that was posed to you is, quote, so what happens next with yourself, Ms. Roberts, and Ms. Reed? And your answer was, so there are different, police officers getting statements from us. At one point, I'm standing with Ms. Reed, and she's saying, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? And there was, I believe, an EMT, a female, standing right next to me, listening to her yelling, did I hit him? Could I have hit him? Is he dead? Is he dead? Is he dead? Was pretty much nonstop. Remember that testimony?
I do.
So in point of fact, you were answering the direct question about what happened in front of the police officer and the EMT, correct?
There were multiple police officers and multiple EMTs present.
So now this is another police officer and a different EMT.
I'm not saying that.
Okay. But nowhere in this did you say that she declared the words, "I am." Correct? We agree on that.
Correct.
Your Honor, I have an item I would like to have marked as next in order.
Okay.
May I approach?
Yes.
I think Proctor is going to cooperate because I think he's going to try to fight this through civil lawsuits. So I don't think it's over and done with yet. He's going to try to bring some kind of civil suit. And so I think he's going to cooperate. But in any event, that'd be interesting if he doesn't cooperate and says, I don't remember. But bottom line is, you really want him there as a defense counsel because the way he treated Karen is just, it doesn't get any worse than that in terms of bias and not having an open mind on investigation. He just wanted to throw the book at her and actually wanted her dead. I mean, when do you get that kind of evidence about an investigator? I mean, that's the worst of the worst. And you see so much of the worst on this case. That's why it's so interesting to cover.
All agreement one is that will be in exhibit 96.
Thank you.
With court permission, I would like to play a portion of this and then stop it.
Okay.
And ask the witness a couple of questions about it. Okay? It's audio only. Ms. McCabe, I've paused the audio tape just to ask you a couple of foundational questions. Do you recognize what's on that audio tape?
Yes, that is my voice.
Okay. You recognize you starting a 911 call, correct?
Correct.
Similar to the call we just listened to a few minutes ago, which was the actual 911 call, correct?
What's the difference between the two of them?
I'm about to explain it. It's a confusing question. I apologize. This appears to be a open voicemail overhearing your 911 call. Do you recognize that?
Now that you explain it, okay.
You hear a rhythmic boom, 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 boom.
The windshield wipers.
Okay, so that was my next question. That would have been an open voicemail that was recorded inside the cab of the SUV that you were seated in, correct?
Correct.
Overhearing you call 911 and overhearing whatever else was going on, ambient noise at the scene, correct?
Correct.
Does that sound like a true and correct copy of at least the portion of the 911 call that you heard?
I have to listen to it again, but
Well, why don't we continue listening to it and see if you recognize
okay.
it? With court's permission?
Yes.
It's about 4 minutes in total, Your Honor.
All right, hold on. Officer, you're asking here, you have a question too long to type, or you're able to come up and ask. I don't know how you take calls through StreamYard. So if somebody knows, can tell me how to do that. I don't see any options here. And, but, so sorry, I can't help you, but I'll try to find that out. So yeah, maybe I can start taking calls as well. All right, let's go back.
Pause it. Do you hear a person in the background screaming?
Yes,
Who is that?
Miss Reed.
All right, this is Karen in the background. You can hear, yeah, heartbreaking. She sounded extremely upset. And so I don't hear Jen screaming at all, right? I don't hear her freaking out. She loved John as well. Why is she so calm during this time frame when they have these recordings? Apparently this is taken off of like a voicemail recording. So that she may have made a call and not hung up. And so in any event.
Did you hear the audio recording that we just marked into evidence?
I did. It was very muffled and some parts were very hard to understand.
Understood. The person on the phone, who was that person?
I called 911.
And the person that was, for the most part, the person's voice that you could hear screaming, sounding sort of hysterical, who was that?
Karen.
Could you also hear Carrie Roberts' voice at various times in the background?
Yes.
And she was, for lack of a better word, trying to calm Karen down.
Yes.
And at some point telling her to just shut up, you're not helping.
Yes, exactly.
Because she was so hysterical and so upset.
Erratic.
I want to play the rest of this. It appears that this recording is longer than your 911 call. You would agree with that?
Well, I'd have to see.
Well, the 911 call has already ended, correct?
I'm not sure how long was the 911 call.
Okay, this is about 3.5 minutes into a 4-minute recording. My only question is, would you agree that the 911 call was subsumed within this full 4-minute recording?
I couldn't make that from that muffled.
You couldn't tell?
I couldn't tell. So if you have my phone record, you could, I'm assuming, tell when the 911 call ended, because I know the 911 call was long because there were multiple, they had transferred me multiple times.
Right. My question to you is, I'd like you to listen very, very closely, and I know that it is a muffled recording by definition. I'm not going to do that. From this point forward, I want you to pay very close attention. I want to ask you if you hear a voice, very muffled, toward the end of this recording. With the first permission.
Yes.
Stop. Did you hear a muffled voice in the foreground after you heard Ms. Reed scream or yell?
I heard two people talking.
One of those was a very muffled voice on this recording, correct?
Most of the recording was muffled.
The one I'm talking about is I just played the voice that was muffled in the foreground of the audio recording, for want of a better phrase.
Yes, I heard that, yes.
Was that you?
I don't know if that was me.
There was nobody else in the cab of the car with you, was there?
I was standing at the trunk of the car, outside of the car.
Kerry Roberts was over by Mr. O'Keefe,
Agree, yes, they were kind of running back and forth at times.
and Karen was over by Mr. O'Keefe for most.
Sorry, I'm just thinking back to my point that I've raised is that, you know, when they went on a break here, it'd have been really good, I think, for Jackson to cross-examine her on the fact that she talked to her attorney. What did her attorney say? None of that stuff she can plead the fifth on, so she'd have to discuss that. And so I think that'll keep in the jury's minds the fresh idea that she's got something to hide. She's lawyered up. The lawyer's actually in the courtroom. She's paying him, and find out all those details, how much she's been paying him, and all the details on the kind of advice. And if she just sits there and says, well, you told me to tell the truth. Why would you need a lawyer if all you're doing is telling you the truth? And ask her things like, was a prosecutor insinuating that he's suspicious of you? You know, stuff like that. And so you just can sort of have a field day asking those kind of questions, is putting them off guard like that.
Yes,
But you were the one by the car.
back and forth. Mhm.
You called Nicole, your sister. By the way, did we finish playing this just for, okay, thank you.
It's perfectly legitimate and should be allowed. And I would say it's unconstitutional if it's not allowed. But yeah, with Judge Canone, who knows what, but I would keep hammering away at that. Build a record for appellate courts.
Okay, that appears to be the end of the tape.
Okay.
Okay. You called your sister at 6:07 and 42 seconds, correct?
Not sure.
I don't have my phone record in front of me,
Does that sound about right?
approximately.
And you made a second phone call at 6:08 and 17 seconds. Does that sound about right?
I did call her twice, yes.
And both of those calls show in your extraction that they were answered phone calls, correct?
I don't have my extraction in front of me.
Well, you've been asked this question a bunch of times, right? You were asked this question at the other proceeding, is that right?
Yes,
You
and
were shown phone records.
if you have them, I could see them here.
You were shown phone records then,
Yes,
and at that time, you were confronted with the fact that the phone records show a 7-second call for 6:07, correct?
Objection.
I'm going to strike the word confronted. Go ahead and ask.
I'll pick another
Go
word.
ahead and ask the
You're
question.
shown evidence that the 6:07 call lasted 7 seconds.
my sister never answered the phone.
Okay. I know you want to answer your own questions.
Yeah,
I'd like it if you'd answer my question. Were you shown records that showed the call lasted 7 seconds?
I cannot recall the exact record I was shown, but
Lizzie B, you're saying if Jackson did that, wouldn't allow the harassment to organically come in. They wanted to avoid that. Well, if she tries to tie that in, why she hired a lawyer, so lawyer's in there to act as a security guard for her. I mean, what's the lawyer got to do with the fact that she's being heckled out in public? So I don't think that opens the door to any of that.
I was shown a phone record.
Okay. And you were shown that the same phone record showed that the 6:08 call lasted 8 seconds, right?
Again, I don't have it in front of me.
Does that sound about right?
About right, and there were a number of other calls that showed answered that weren't answered.
Well, we'll get to those in a minute. So the two calls at 6:07 and 6:08, at least the records indicate about 15 seconds worth of open line time, talk time. 7 seconds, 8 seconds, right?
You have the record in front of you. I don't.
I'm just asking if you were in front of, if you were, there's that word again, if you were shown records that established that based on your own phone extraction, your phone records, that the 607 call, 7-second call, the 608 call was an 8-second call, right?
I was shown records, but I don't know exactly what they were, how long the call said, because she never answered the phone regardless.
You also made another phone call at 6:23, did you not? To Brian Albert?
If you could share my phone record, it would be very helpful.
Do you recall it?
I know I called my sister and I called my brother-in-law in the house. I do not know the exact times.
That's all I'm asking. You made a phone call to Brian Albert as well, right?
I believe so.
That was around 6:23. It was a few minutes after you had called Nicole twice, right?
Correct.
And that call was not answered.
None of them were answered.
But the record showed that that call was not answered, as opposed to Nicole's 2 calls, right?
Right.
The call.
Oops, sorry. Lost where's that? Sorry.
About right.
About right. And there were a number of other calls that showed answered that weren't answered.
But we'll get to those in a minute. So the 2 calls at 6:07 and 6:08, at least the records indicate about 15 seconds worth of open line time, talk time. 7 seconds, 8 seconds, right?
I think I jumped ahead.
You have the record in front of you. I don't.
I'm just asking if you were.
Let me know what
if you were, there's that word
time
again.
frame I was
If you were
at.
shown records that established that based on your own phone extraction, your phone records, that the 6:07 call, 7-second call, 6:08 call was an 8-second call, right?
I was shown records, but I don't know exactly what they were, how long the call said, because she never answered the phone regardless.
You also made another phone call at 6:23, did you not? To Brian Albert?
If you could share my phone record, it would be very helpful.
Do you recall it?
I know I called my sister and I called my brother-in-law in the house. I do not know the exact times.
That's all I'm asking. You made a phone call to Brian Albert as well, right?
I believe so.
That was around 6:23. It was a few minutes after you had called Nicole twice, right?
Correct.
And that call was not answered.
None of them were answered.
But the record showed that that call was not answered, as opposed to Nicole's 2 calls, right?
Right.
Yeah, this is the point here. Defense, Dusty Blue saying defense needs to show visuals of the timeline of when Karen Reed arrived at 34 Fairview onward with cell data versus Jen's calls. That is so true. And I know somebody else pointed out here tonight, there's a channel out there called Micro Dots on YouTube. And it just came out today, I believe. And it's something about the drop off, I think it is. And it's about 28 minutes or so. And it's really excellent. It shows a breakdown of the timelines. And it actually makes you look at it from the standpoint of it's the time frame for Karen to get to the house there at 34 Fairview and then be able to get back and be on John's Wi-Fi. So she got there, according to digital records, she got there around 12:23, 12:24-ish to 34 Fairview. And she was back to John's place by 12:36. And she said she waited a few minutes for John and then she left. So if you look at Jen's timeline, it doesn't add up at all. And Karen actually would have left at the time Ryan was around there. And keep in mind, Ryan was there saying that Karen was sitting in her SUV by herself by the flagpole. So it really makes you think that Karen must have left from the flagpole and gone home. She pulled up ahead a little bit when the pickup truck came there. And then she went ahead and left, and there's no sign of John. And even the sister, what's her name, Julie, came out, and there's two other riders in the truck, Ricky and Heather. So you got all these people that would have had eyes on the front part of that yard, nothing being seen there. None of the neighbors heard anything. And so for Karen to already be back at John O'Keefe's house at 12:36, that means that John, if he was out in the yard, he would have been hit right around the time that Ryan is there. So really, Ryan would have seen it all. And so Ryan left at 12:29. And so Karen, in order to get back 3:36, she must have followed right after him. And John was not around to be hit at that time by any car. So it really, I think, is something that is an alibi. If you look at what an alibi is, you're not there to have committed the crime. It's really an alibi defense. And so for them not to present the alibi defense, that's what I'd argue, and really focus on the timelines. If you do notice the alibi, you also can request the specifics, like try to pin down the prosecution and say the date, time, and location that the death occurred. And so I'm curious what exact time they're going to say formally, and then use that as an alibi. Notice of alibi is what I'd do if I had a case like this, and say that Karen was not there at the time that John O'Keefe was hit. And what it looks like, he's beat up, right? It doesn't look like a motor vehicle strike. So in any event, this whole timeline about Karen being there at 12:45 in front of this 34 Fairview house is not forensically backed up by digital evidence. Okay. And so they're trying to extend the timeline to make it sure that Ryan is out of there. And so the question is, if he left at 12:29, where was John O'Keefe those minutes? He wasn't laying there in the road, on the side of the road there. So I think this really is the timeline really exonerates the defense of Karen. And I think that the defense counsel should really hit this up, show a big billboard, show all the timelines, show all the calls that she made, and really hammer that home with all these different experts. So yeah, you better have good graphics and have a walkthrough graphics, sort of like they did in the closing for Charlie Adelson's case, the way they had all this rolling screen of stuff show up. So that's what they need to do. The defense needs to get some kind of presentation like that of the details. Yeah, I think if you look at the timeline of when these calls and texts are coming through, and then you got all the other reasonable doubts, like there's no broken tail light there that they would have noticed. There was no snow to cover it up at that time, because it just, what are they saying, it happened while Ryan was there or before he got there? I mean, Ryan got there at let's see, John and Karen arrived at 12:23 to 12:24ish, and then Ryan shows up at 12:23 and texts, "I'm here," to his sister. So they both arrived at the same time and both left at almost the exact same time. So right there, we know John would have been killed out in the street that way. So it had to have been happening. Something very fast must have happened. And Karen was not there. She was at his house. So very, very critical information that I think could be better presented.
The calls to Nicole were deleted from your phone before you turned that phone into law enforcement, weren't they?
Not by me.
By somebody else?
I never deleted any calls when I willingly handed my phone over.
You claim that you didn't delete calls, but you do know that your phone was forensically analyzed and those calls were in the deleted file folder, correct?
I have seen that, but there were 20 calls all in a group that were all deleted. So cherry picking a few makes it look a different way.
Okay, so we'll get to those. I'm not cherry picking anything, okay? I'm asking you questions about the records.
Which I would love a copy of if I could see.
We'll get to that in a second. I'm just going by your memory. You've seen these records a bunch of times. You've been questioned about these records a bunch of times, right?
Yes.
Okay. So we know that you called at 6:07, 6:08, or thereabouts, and about 6:23. 2 to Nicole, 1 to Brian, correct?
Correct.
And you'll agree with me that notwithstanding those phone calls, by the way, did you leave voicemails?
No.
When did you hang up? Before it went to voicemail, or was it into voicemail before you hung up?
So it was a bit of a hysterical scene that morning, and I was in a state of shock, and I was just calling my sister and my brother-in-law. They did not answer the phone. I cannot tell you when I hung up because it was a hysterical scene. I was in a state of shock. Everyone was running around, and what seems to be forgotten is that my friend was lying there on the ground.
Oh, I don't think anybody's forgotten that.
Well, now it's a friend. Okay, so she didn't sound like he didn't sound like much of a friend during that 911 call.
You, in fact, did not leave voicemails for any of those 3 calls, did you?
Again, I don't have my phone record in front of me.
That's because Nicole didn't get any voicemails. The calls were.
If you're going through, that's the thing. If you're going through and questioning somebody on all these different timelines and comparing the timelines of the phone calls and texts, and it's a jury's not going to be taking good enough notes to keep all that squared away. That's why you need to have an exhibit with this witness, and as they admit to a certain time, have it flash up on a screen, but have something there for the jury to visualize and understand. The judge denied some different visuals. Maybe if it's more demonstrative, like the video I talked about today, about talking about the drop off, where it actually tries to recreate the scene, I can see that being a tougher issue to get in. But if you're talking about just straight timelines, you can get a timeline exhibit presented. Okay, so that's what the defense should be doing on this, because really the timeline is a huge thing to basically create an alibi for Karen.
Answer, right?
The calls were not answered.
You do agree with me that Brian and Nicole Albert, Brian Albert being a police officer, never came out of the house, right?
Correct. Neither did any neighbor.
I know you'd like to continue editorializing after the fact. It's probably a time and a place for it. This isn't it. If you can answer my question, I'd ask that you do that. Did Brian Albert come out of the house?
No.
Did Nicole Albert come out of the house?
No.
Thank you. How many of the initial police officers from Canton Police Department who responded to the scene were you friends with?
I would say I am friendly with Mike Lank. He was 5 years older than me. I knew him growing up. If I saw him around town, I would say, "Hey, how are you?" Pretty much that's the extent.
Anybody else other than Mike Lank that you're friends with?
Not that I am friends with. I knew of Officer Sean Good, but I wouldn't say I was friends with him. I just knew who he was.
And you also knew that Officer Lank was very good friends with the Albert family.
Good friends, yes.
You knew that Mike Lank and Chris Albert had a long-standing friendship, correct?
Correct.
You just indicated you also knew Officer Good, is that right?
Didn't know him. I said I knew of him.
Okay. With regard to names like Sarah, Delaney, not so much.
Sarah has a sister that's the same age as my sister, but I had never, to my knowledge, met Sarah.
And of all the officers who responded to the scene, the 2 who actually went inside the Albert home to talk to Brian Albert and others was, in fact, Mike Lank and Officer Good.
I don't remember Officer Good in the house. I only remember Officer Lank.
The reason you know that, the reason you have a memory of what was happening inside the house is because you were allowed to actually go into that home, correct?
Correct.
And you went into that home before any of the officers went into the home. Is that right?
Correct.
You were allowed to have private conversations with Brian Albert?
I woke Brian Albert up.
Were you allowed to have private conversations with Brian Albert?
Yes,
And you were allowed to have private conversations with your sister, Nicole?
yes,
That was before the police ever went in to do any formal interviews of you, Brian, or Nicole, correct?
correct.
Did you discuss in these private conversations how you three were going to answer any questions for the police when you were asked?
No,
Did you talk about what you were going to say in any respect?
we were in shock. There was
Yes or
no,
Did you talk about what Brian and Nicole were going to say in their interviews with the police?
no,
Did Brian Albert give you any advice as a police detective what you should do or say when you were interviewed?
no,
Did he give you any advice as a police detective what you should do with your cell phone?
no,
Did he tell you that the police might want to get a hold of your cell phone at some point?
no,
Did you two discuss the calls that you made to Nicole Albert at 6:07 and 6:08 and the call that you made to Brian Albert at 6:23?
no,
Did you ever discuss the idea of potentially deleting any of those calls that were made that early morning?
absolutely not.
Would you tell us if you did?
Yes, because I'm an honest and truthful person.
She can't keep her
Did you
story
tell him which
straight.
officers were outside?
I don't recall.
Did you tell him that Officer Lang specifically, friend of the Alberts, was outside?
I don't recall.
And then your husband, Matt McCabe, arrived at the scene, correct?
Correct.
He was allowed to come in the house as well, right?
I believe Officer Lank was in the house before Matt came into the house.
And a little bit later that morning, Julie Albert came over, correct?
Correct.
And by the way, Officer Lank, after just a few minutes, then left the house, correct?
Correct.
Leaving all the witnesses inside together.
Correct.
And I can't remember if I asked this question or just thought it out loud. Did Julie Albert come over?
She did.
And then Chris came over.
Yes.
Even Brian Higgins came over.
Correct.
These are all friends and family of yours, correct?
Not Brian Higgins. I had only met a handful of times.
But you consider him a friend.
A friend of Brian Albert's is how I would reference him.
Fair enough. So these are friends and family of Brian Albert.
Correct.
And everyone was permitted to discuss the circumstances of the evening before going into the early morning hours with each other with no police there, correct?
I sat with my family in shock and horror.
That sounds really rehearsed. You know, one of the things that I think is helpful is if you have a witness like her and you want to play in front of the jury this question of, you'd agree with me that the police have never identified you as a suspect in this case, right? And yet you have a lawyer here sitting with you, and yet you also have no reason to lie. Then if you are saying you had nothing to do with this, you'd have no reason to lie. Isn't that correct? So, and if you'd agree that if there is something that you lie about, that could indicate you do have something to hide about this case. Isn't that fair to say? So that's something that I think is you can then drive home in your closing, because you can bring out all the different lies and inconsistencies that are told by a witness, and then bring home that fact in your closing and say, look, these are all the indicators of deception. These are all the deflections. These are all the outright lies that are told. And then you say, what would be the reason other than the fact that they have something to hide, and they admitted to you that somebody that would not tell the truth would have something to hide, right? So get them to admit that people that lie and under oath do that because they have something to hide. So anyway, it's something that I've done numerous times that worked out pretty good.
Were you allowed to discuss the circumstances of the night before, going into the early morning hours, amongst yourselves without any police presence? Yes or no?
There was no reason for us to be allowed or not allowed. We did nothing wrong.
Understand my question? Did you get it?
Yes, I understand your question.
Can you answer it, yes or no? Were you allowed, that group of folks,
Mhm.
were you allowed to discuss the case without a police presence?
Yes,
Okay. So you listened during that friends and family gathering, you listened to what Brian Albert had to say, correct?
He didn't really say much.
He was able to listen to what you had to say?
Again, you're creating a scene that didn't happen.
Anything, Ms. McCabe, I'm asking some questions. If you don't seem to want to answer,
Objection, Your Honor.
All right, so let's ask a question and let's get an answer, okay?
yes or no? Was Brian Albert there within earshot when you discussed your version of what had happened?
I didn't discuss much. I sat there in shock and horror, so I spoke very little, to be honest with you.
But what little you did speak, he could hear.
Yes,
And Nicole could hear.
yes.
And Chris Albert could hear.
Chris came much later.
And your husband, Matt McCabe, he could hear.
Yes,
Okay. And then when Chris is talking about what happened at Waterfall, you could hear and Brian could hear. In other words, everybody could hear everybody.
Chris came much later. When Chris came, I was almost about to leave.
I'm guessing that the topic of what had happened was still on everybody's mind.
Everybody was trying to figure out what had happened
And you're discussing it amongst yourselves. That's my point.
with my sister and my brother-in-law and my husband. Correct.
Before you left, you said you were about to leave. Before you left, another Albert came over to the house, correct?
I don't recall seeing him.
Him.
Kevin Albert,
How'd you know I was talking about Kevin Albert?
because you said another Albert came over, and I was
6 brothers.
told later it was Kevin.
I see. So you believe that Kevin was not there when you were still there?
I was in a state of shock. He
Kevin-
may have walked in.
I'm asking, do you remember?
I don't remember it. No,
Officer, another
he
L.
could have been, absolutely.
And you knew he was a Canton police officer.
Yes,
You had already gotten a call from Michael Proctor, hadn't you?
yes,
He told you he wanted to speak with you.
correct.
So you knew at that point that the Massachusetts State Police troopers had taken over the investigation of the case, correct?
Correct.
Did Michael Proctor tell you that the Canton Police Department had been recused from the case?
Objection.
Sustained.
Let me ask it a different way. Did you have knowledge in any way, shape, form, or fashion at that point that Canton Police Department was not supposed to be involved in the case?
Objection.
Sustained.
Speaking of Trooper Proctor, when you first interviewed with him, that was January 29th, 2022. We've already discussed that a little bit today, correct?
Correct.
And he was taking notes while you were interviewing with him, is that right?
I believe so.
You mentioned on Friday your observations of the taillight that day, is that right?
Correct.
You told Mr. Lally that you indicated that the taillight looked, when you saw it, just like the photograph that he showed you, correct?
I told him it was hard to make out and with the snow on it, but it looked, and the picture that he showed.
He showed you a second photo, a close-up,
Mhm.
basically, of the SUV and Sally Pond.
Mhm.
Is that right?
Yes,
And you said, yeah, that's the condition of the taillight, correct?
yes,
You also told Trooper Proctor about your observations of the taillight on that same day, the 29th, right?
correct,
That's literally the same day that you saw the taillight, correct?
correct,
Just a few hours later, is that right?
correct.
And what you told Trooper Proctor that day was that you, quote, saw a crack in it, end quote, correct?
I told him that the taillight was cracked.
Matter of fact, the words that you used were that you saw, and I'm not fighting you on those words. You saw that it was cracked. You actually said, I saw a crack in it, correct?
That's what he said. I said, I'm telling you, I said the taillight was cracked.
This is another example of him screwing up your words, correct?
You'd have to ask Trooper Proctor.
So I'm asking you, did you say, I saw a crack in it?
I said the taillight was cracked.
So you didn't say, I saw a crack in it, right?
I said the taillight was cracked.
The photograph that you were shown, with the court's permission, it's exhibit 92, I believe, from Friday.
Okay.
May I, Your Honor?
Yes.
You see that photograph? You were shown this photograph on Friday. Does that look like, does it like has a crack in it?
It's cracked. Yes.
It's actually completely missing.
Yeah. And I believe in one of the reports, one of the many reports, it will say that I said it was cracked and missing pieces.
Right. Does that look like it's cracked and missing pieces?
Look at this. This is not a cracked taillight, corner taillight. It's entirely smashed out. Okay. So if you look at the vehicle when it's being towed, and you look at also when it's leaving John O'Keefe's place, there's a crack there, but it's not all smashed out. So when did that happen? That right there is reasonable doubt. If Karen really struck John O'Keefe with this taillight, why was it still intact after the fact? And why are they finding then pieces there at the scene?
Does that look like the entirety of the taillight is basically gone?
Again, in that picture, there are the red pieces. There are some of it still there. So it's cracked and missing. In a state of shock, that was my description.
Got it. So in a state of shock, you said there was a crack in it.
No,
Hours after,
I said it was cracked. I never said there was a crack in it.
so if Trooper Proctor wrote that down, that would be an example of him getting your words wrong yet again.
Objection.
That's been answered. Let's move along, please.
That's okay for that. Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay.
I want to get back to January 29th, that interview with Trooper Proctor. After this interview with Michael Lank, you eventually made your way back to your house. Is that right?
Yes,
You went with your husband, Matt,
yes,
and you knew that Trooper Proctor was going to show up and interview you and Matt, Mr. McCabe, correct?
on the phone, he wanted to speak with me.
Is that a yes?
So I wasn't aware. He asked to speak with me. I wasn't aware if he was going to speak with Matt.
Okay. You were at least aware that you were going to be interviewed.
Correct.
You told Brian Albert that Trooper Proctor was planning on interviewing you as well.
Correct.
Before Trooper Proctor showed up to conduct that interview at your house, Brian Albert actually showed up at your house, correct?
Correct.
So Brian Albert made sure that he was in your home before Trooper Proctor made it to your house, correct?
Objection.
Distinct.
Okay. 1 second.
Trooper Proctor, Brian Albert actually showed up at your house, correct?
Correct.
So Brian Albert made sure that he was in your home before Trooper Proctor made it to your house, correct?
Objection.
Distinct.
Okay, that one, I mean, seriously, the question could have been rephrased better to make it not look like you're speculating on what the state of mind of Brian Albert was, but bring out the coordination. It was coordinated so that she wasn't alone at the house without Albert there. Albert is the one steering things. It looks like that's what I would be arguing as defense counsel. He's the one that told the Ryan's sister she cannot leave the house till he got the situation under control, is what I would be arguing as defense counsel. And then here he is also making sure they know what's going on, and they also steer Proctor, who's actually a friend, so they really have to steer him. But things are tightly controlled, and it looks very suspicious.
Brian Albert was in your home before Trooper Proctor was in your home. Is that right?
I am not sure who arrived first.
But he was there when you were interviewed, wasn't he?
He was upstairs, yes.
And you believe, of course, with that statement, he didn't hear anything about what was going to happen, right? He didn't hear anything about the interview,
No, I don't think he could hear it from where he was.
but you knew he was just a few feet away.
I knew he was up in my bedroom.
My impression is that she's been a terrible witness for the state. Defense is scoring huge points with her here. I think they should have done a better timeline and presented some things, some kind of graphics for the jury to see. And even if the judge doesn't allow that, what they call chalks, then I would do something to really crystallize that by describing it in details, just like sort of I'm doing here. I don't have any charts I'm showing you, but just describing the fact that if Ryan showed up at the same time virtually as Karen and John, and left almost virtually the same time, and Karen gets back to the house at 12:36, she wasn't there at the timeline you're saying. Are you aware of that? Things of that nature is how I would try to drive those points home.
We've talked a little bit about your call records, and I want to pivot for a second and ask you about those call records. This is Exhibit 90. May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
Do you recognize that document?
I do, yes.
You were shown this document last week, is that right?
Correct.
This is a forensic extraction report of John O'Keefe's cell phone that you were shown on Friday, right?
Correct.
You acknowledge that it's an accurate report of calls found on John's phone between you and him, is that right?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, and this shows the calls that you made to John's phone or you received from John's phone on or between or at or between 12:14 a.m. and 12:50 a.m. I want to direct your attention to those timeframes, correct?
Correct.
All right, I want to start at the bottom, and it may go in reverse chronological order.
Okay.
I think it does. At 12:14, it shows that you called John O'Keefe and that call was answered. Is that right?
Yeah, correct.
At 12:18 a.m.,
Yeah, he started jumping around here, so she maybe thinks he's done with that kind of timeline question, but then he comes back to it here.
shows that John O'Keefe called your phone and that was answered as well.
Correct.
And then at 12:29 a.m., you also called John O'Keefe's phone and y'all had a short conversation as well. Is that right?
No.
That the record shows, I think it shows, pardon me. Unknown, correct? In terms of whether it was missed or answered?
Excuse me, can you repeat that?
Sure, the 12:29, I want to concentrate on the 12:29 a.m. call.
Okay.
That one in the Celebrite extraction, it shows in terms of whether the call was answered or not, the status is unknown, correct? It's on the last page,
Yeah,
second row from the top.
12:29. Unknown, yes.
Unknown. However, you've already acknowledged that y'all did have a short conversation on that 2:29
No,
call, correct?
we didn't speak at 2:29. We spoke at 12:14 and we spoke at 12:18. We never spoke at 12:29.
So you're indicating that 12:29 call was either missed or otherwise? Went to voicemail, something?
The 12:29, yes.
Okay. I want to show you a document. Well, let me ask it this way. According to this, there were 6 more calls between your phone and John O'Keefe's phone.
Correct.
Count them, correct? 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. And that's that's up to 12:50 a.m. Is that right?
Correct.
All right. I'd like to show you another document. Or if I could.
Yeah, so keep in mind, there's 7 calls she made to John, and then also some texts. There's no voicemail, so she kept on calling that number from 12:29 and 12:50. She also called John, and let's see, at 12:14, and then he called her back, and then so from the 14, the last we heard of it, to 12:29. So this that time frame of 15 minutes roughly, that all of a sudden she doesn't pursue where you at, what's going on anymore. But then suddenly 12:29, she starts dialing it back up again. But why isn't she looking out of the house? Let's see if
Approach
that's brought
briefly.
up. We kept on looking out the window, remember? And on Sunday, we covered that. Now, all of a sudden, she quit looking out the window for those minutes. He was already there. So why isn't she like walking out the front door saying, hey, where you guys at? Yeah.
May I?
Yes.
Thank you.
I'll take, so we don't get them mixed up, I'll take exhibit 90 back.
Okay. Thank you.
I want to show you one more document that you weren't shown on Friday. Do you recognize this one?
No.
Okay. If you look
I remember that.
where it indicates on the left column, I'm just putting my thumb here, the
Okay.
left column, the MSISDN user, there's a number that ends there.
MS. So,
0142, 0142.
Your Honor, may I approach?
Yes.
So I'm going to answer this question before we approach.
I have no idea what we're approaching about this document.
Yes.
Why don't we just go up there?
Sure.
May I have that, please? I know we need.
Yeah, it does look like she was like someone was trying to find his phone. Maybe the phone got misplaced somehow. It does sort of look like with that many calls, somebody's trying to find out where the phone is. At least that's something to argue. I'm going to jump ahead here. I'd also call as a witness Karen's dad if I was her defense counsel, try to humanize her. He's such a sweet guy.
It says Apple ID.
thank you.
Okay,
Yes.
here we go.
Sure.
Thank you.
You're welcome. If you look on the left column, Ms. McCabe,
Yes.
you'll see something that says Apple ID.
Yes.
Look to the right of it. Do you recognize that unredacted portion? I don't want you to read it out or anything. You recognize that?
Yes.
Whose Apple ID is that?
That's mine.
Okay, if you look, 6 lines below that, there's a full phone number. Again, don't read the phone number out. Just tell me if you recognize it.
I do.
Whose is that?
That's mine.
Okay. May I coach on it?
Yes.
I'll take the unredacted copy back.
Okay.
So we don't get it mixed up. Does this appear to be Cellbrite extraction of your phone records, your Apple ID?
Yes.
And you recognize, without telling me what it is, you recognize that phone number as your phone number back at the time and the Apple ID back at the time,
Yes.
associated with the phone that you then turned in to law enforcement, correct?
Correct.
You've just looked at the extraction report for John O'Keefe's phone, and you saw those calls between your phone and John O'Keefe's phone after going from 12:14, after that, all the way up to 12:50, correct?
Correct.
Take a look at the last couple of pages, page 3 and 4 of your own cell phone extraction report. And tell me if you see a single call listed between you and John O'Keefe for January 29th between 12:14 and 12:50.
Speed this up a little bit.
There are calls to a number that I'm assuming is John.
What
I'm
time?
just not sure. I see a call. Wait a minute.
You loved him and you don't know his phone number?
This report has
You're texting
Times
him, remember his
everywhere.
phone number. He
Right,
died.
it's chronological except for the call.
Call phone number?
You see a call at 5:52 to John O'Keefe's phone,
I see a call at 5:52. Yes.
but there's not a single call before 5:52 a.m. between 12:14 and 12:50 a.m. Is that right? Not one.
It's very hard to. This report trumps time-wise.
You can look at every single time on the report. There's not that many.
I'm just trying to say that it goes from 7:21 to 5:52 to 7:33 to 7:49. There's no order. They're out of order.
I understand that, Mr. McCabe, but if you look at every one of the entries, there's not a single entry for 12:14, 12:18, or any of the subsequent 12:29, any of the subsequent phone calls that are all shown on John O'Keefe's phone extraction. Did you agree with that?
Correct.
May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, I would move for the admission of in as an exhibit.
Okay, is there an objection?
No, Your Honor.
Exhibit 97.
May I inquire, Your Honor?
Yes.
Fact of the matter is, according to those Celebrite records and that extraction from your own phone, every one of the calls that you made to John O'Keefe's phone between 12:29 and, I'm sorry, between 12:14 and 12:50 a.m. was deleted and unrecovered, correct?
I didn't understand that report, and I'm not an expert.
When you compare the two, you saw a bunch of calls on John O'Keefe's phone, right? You know, he couldn't have deleted them. He passed away, right?
Correct.
You saw your cell phone extraction, which is the handshake to John O'Keefe's phone, and all of your calls are missing, right?
Objection.
Can you answer that question?
You know, the thing is, I would ask, you're making all these calls. What did you do between 12:29 and 12:50 to look out the window and check on what was going on? If they're already pretty much there the last time you talked to them, and then all those minutes go by and nobody comes in the house, surely you would have looked back outside and seen what is happening out there. So instead of just talking about the calls themselves, talk about what she's doing to assess what's going on, when basically the last she'd heard from them, they're practically there. And she's telling them to park behind her car.
Question?
I'm confused. That paper, I don't understand it. It was vague. There were numbers. There were calls everywhere. There was a number of missing calls.
There's a bunch of missing calls, right? You didn't see any of the calls that were reflected on John O'Keefe's phone. Is that right? Yes or no? They're not there.
A lot of calls are missing. I'm not really even sure what's there because the numbers are it's all redacted.
So you were not seeing any redacted calls.
The page you just had in front of me was redacted.
It's now an exhibit.
No one would believe these are all but dial. No one would believe that.
The numbers, I don't
All
know
these
people's phone
government,
numbers. I just have them as
prosecution
contacts.
witnesses.
Mr. McCabe, you just said a second ago, and we can do this all day long, or we can just make it simple. The fact of the matter is that report did not show any of the calls that John O'Keefe's phone report showed, correct? From 12:14 to 12:50,
I believe there was one on there.
5:52. That's the next morning, ma'am, right?
Were there other calls in that time period on the Celebrate?
You just said there weren't. You just looked at it.
I've told you that Celebrate report was extremely hard to read.
Fact is, there are no calls on your own phone extraction between you and John O'Keefe between 12:14 and 12:50. Would you just agree with that, at least on that report?
Objection, Your Honor.
Sustained.
The fact is that you deleted your call record before you turned your phone in, didn't you, Ms. McCabe? That's what that report shows.
Absolutely not.
You sanitized your phone because you didn't want the police to know who you had been calling or the fact that you had been calling John O'Keefe's phone incessantly, correct?
Incorrect. I willingly turned over my phone.
After you deleted your phone call logs, correct?
Absolutely not.
What date did you turn your phone over?
Possibly February 3rd.
How many days after this incident was that?
4 or 5.
So you had plenty of time to talk to that friends and family group and ultimately decide to delete your phone calls, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
I mean, this is totally legitimate questioning. You know, Lally knows this is looking bad for him, and that's why he objects. And the judges has no problems just being a rubber stamp for Lally.
Did you ever have any group chats with family members who are witnesses in this case?
Yes.
Very suspicious. Why'd you be deleting those calls? That's
Yeah, Proctor?
evidence.
Yes.
I mean, think about it. This is somebody you love. Your last calls to them, you'd want to preserve them. You wouldn't want to like delete them. Why would you delete them? You know, there's a police investigation. Nothing's should be investigated like a homicide of a law enforcement officer. They're going to be putting all kinds of resources into that. You're intricately involved in being there at the scene. You're the first one to find them there. You and Jen, you and Karen. So, and you don't realize how critical you are as a witness, and then you go ahead and delete these messages. Highly, highly suspicious. It's not adding up.
While Mr. Lally is looking through that packet, can I just ask to make sure the record is clear? Did you delete any of your calls before you turned your phone into law enforcement?
I spoke with the 2 officers that I handed my phone over to, and I asked if I could delete the personal conversations with my daughters. And they said absolutely yes, that I could.
So other than calls with your daughters that you did you delete any other calls on your phone at all?
It was text messages. It was actually text messages with my daughters that I deleted, and that was all I deleted.
Did you delete any phone calls?
I do not recall deleting any phone calls at all. I would have no reason to delete.
Okay. Look at her squeezing her eyes. That's a classic sign that folks have when it's really hard for them to say something that they know is not true. So that's an indicator right there.
Anything.
So that's very different than I didn't delete any phone calls. I do not remember
Shaking her
deleting
head
phone
also.
calls.
I mean,
Which you might have.
In day-to-day life, people delete things, but I do not recall deleting any phone calls.
In day-to-day life, did you delete any of the calls to John O'Keefe?
No,
Did you delete any of your calls with Nicole Albert?
no,
Did you delete any of your calls with Brian Albert,
no,
with Chris Albert,
no,
with Julie Albert,
no,
Coleman Albert?
no,
With any of the witnesses in this case, did you delete any calls before you turned that phone over?
no, no.
Mayor Proctor?
Yes.
Ms. McCabe, I'm handing you a packet of documents. Appears to be about 10 pages long. Do you recognize what's in those documents?
Yes,
You indicated already that you were part of a group chat with certain members of your family and friends.
correct.
Did that group chat, I'm most interested in the group chat between yourself, Nicole Albert, Brian Albert, Matt McCabe, on or around that group chat starting on or around February 1st, 2022.
Okay.
Does that look like a true and accurate reflection of the text messages between, or certain of the text messages between and among that group?
Yes, the ones I've seen. Yes.
On
Can
February
you just
1st?
tell me what page you're on? I'm sorry.
Of course, Your Honor.
The Bates stamp number?
2148.
Okay, thank you.
Start.
Thank you.
And they should go relatively chronologically, Your Honor, page by
Okay.
page. On February 1st, 2022, around 2:15 in the afternoon on this group chat, did you receive a message from your husband on the group? This is on page 2148. And it should be the middle bubble, the middle and the bottom bubble. Quote, Julie said channel 4 is in BE. You see that?
Yes.
The response from Matt McCabe is eating, I assume, quote, ask Chris to ask some questions. Tell them the guy never went in the house, end quote. You see that?
Yes.
Look at the next page, the top, 149. There's a one-word answer from Brian Albert.
Mhm.
What does that answer?
Exactly.
Does it appear to you from this chat that Matt McCabe was directing witnesses, specifically Chris Albert, what to say to the news media?
Objection.
I'll allow that. Is that what you're seeing?
That is not how I would understand this.
He never went in that, tell them he never went in the house was the story that had been concocted between and among this group of people on this chat, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
No.
Why can't you say overruled, Judge? You can say that for the defense. You cannot say it for the prosecution. Is that because the chief prosecutor, Morrissey, got you your judgeship? It's just so blatantly one-sided.
John never went in the house. It wasn't a story. It was the truth. And it is the truth.
Just like she said, I hit him.
Correct.
So according to this chat, at least, at the very base level, this is one witness telling another witness
What's going on?
to give certain information to the media that could be
Like I
useful to the
said,
group. Correct.
98%
Tell them the
success
guy never went
rate.
in the house, right?
Objection.
Sustained.
Matt McCabe was directing Chris Albert. Chris Albert wasn't even at the house, was he?
Chris Albert was not at the house now.
But this chat is Matt McCabe, your husband, telling Chris Albert, who was never at the house and would have no personal knowledge of what happened at the house, to specifically say, the guy never came in the house. The guy, by the way, being John O'Keefe. Right?
That's what he wrote.
Does that sound to you a little bit like collusion?
Objection.
Sustained.
At some point, you sought out the guy, by the way, being John O'Keefe. Right?
That's what he wrote.
Does that sound to you a little bit like collusion?
Objection.
Sustained.
Legitimate
At some point, you sought out
question. Wow.
Kerry Roberts'
Hide the ball.
cell
All
phone
the
number
sport's about.
shortly after the 29th, or maybe not, maybe on the 29th. Right?
Correct.
You didn't have her cell number in your phone?
No.
One of your primary concerns was to make sure that you got in contact with Kerry Roberts before the day's end, right?
I wanted to speak to Carrie as she was on her way to the hospital, and I wanted to check in on John.
One of your primary concerns, Ms. McCabe, was that you wanted to make sure you got a hold of Kerry Roberts and had communication with her before the end of the day.
It had nothing to do with getting in touch with her by the end of the day. It was a friend reaching out, wondering how her friend was doing, who was just taken off the front line.
On the 29th.
Yes.
So before the end of the day, Ms. McCabe, you do this all day long. Before the end of the day, you were trying to get a hold of Kerry Roberts.
Rigged.
Correct?
Immediately in the morning, I wanted to get in touch with her.
Right. So you sought out her phone number. First, you tried my client, Karen Reed, correct?
Correct.
But then you found another source for that information. Is that right?
Correct.
And you said just a second ago, you were claiming that you needed that information because you knew that she was on the way to see John O'Keefe's parents,
She was picking them up.
and you wanted to check on them.
Correct.
You've been friends with the O'Keefe family for years, haven't you?
Correct.
So you didn't have a need to get Kerry Roberts' phone number, did you?
I wanted to speak with Carrie, see how she was doing. I was not going to call Peg.
You had her phone number, didn't you?
I do, yes.
So if you wanted to check on somebody, you could have just called her.
I was not going to call Peg O'Keefe on the way to see her son at the hospital.
Check on your friend. That was just too much.
I wanted to ask Carrie. I'm sure she was boggled down and probably did not want to speak with anyone. It was a simple thing. I made sure I got Kerry Roberts' number so I could check in and see how John was doing. Also, we had just been through an extremely traumatic event together. There's nothing evil
Kerry
here.
Roberts' number, Ms. McCabe, is because you wanted to make sure that you controlled her story as she left your site, correct?
Absolutely not.
Did you take any steps whatsoever to influence Kerry Roberts' statements?
No.
Because that would be collusion, wouldn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
Lally, I just could go on and on. You do not belong in that position. And it's just really sad to see that you have no interest in giving a defendant a fair trial.
Did you write a text to the group, including Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Matt McCabe, where you informed them that, quote, and this is, Your Honor, on page 2158, where you informed them, quote,
Wow. Yeah, that's a good point. Why would she be calling Carrie to find out how John's doing? Why didn't she just call Karen?
Carrie is here going over timeline, end quote.
Correct.
So you reported back to Brian, Nicole, and Matt that Carrie was where?
She came over my house.
And you two sat down and went over a, quote, timeline together.
Peggy spoke to Carrie.
Yes or no? I didn't ask about Peggy.
Well, that's where the timeline started at.
Did you ask Carrie, or did Carrie come up, show up at your house
Yeah.
and, quote unquote, go over a timeline?
Carrie showed up asking to sit down with me to do a timeline so we would remember everything that had happened.
And you wanted to be super helpful about that, right?
Objection, Your Honor.
I'll say differently.
Sure. You wanted to be helpful to Carrie Roberts.
The two of us were trying to figure out what had happened to our friend.
And so you made sure that you created and drafted with Carrie Roberts a timeline for her, correct?
I didn't make sure of anything. She was the one that asked me to do it.
And not only did you create a timeline, you then reported back to your group, Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Matt McCabe, that she was creating this timeline with you on February 1st, 2022. Isn't that right?
Yes.
After you created or drafted this timeline with Carrie, she actually sat for an interview with the police, did she not? That's not in the chats. I'm just asking.
Imagine that.
She sat down for an interview.
You find somebody dead and you're worried about creating a timeline with another witness. Why would you need to corroborate that and get your story straight? You say what you know from your perspective. You don't need to get with somebody else, tell them the right times. Why is she so focused on the timeline? Even that is suspicious, because when we just talked about earlier about the timeline, about how this Ryan and two other people plus his sister coming out of the house, there's 4 people up until around 12:29, 12:30ish, and Jen was looking out the windows frequently up until that key time frame. And then she never talks about being looking out the window again. And we have Karen Reed already at John O'Keefe's place at 12:36, linked into the Wi-Fi there. That really saves her. That's huge, because she didn't go back there until she was with Karen. There's no indication the prosecution is going to say that she went back there a second time between the time that she left and then came back at later that morning with Jen here. So it's really the timeline thing is what really helps prove that Karen was not a part of this. So timeline here looks like, yeah, it's an alibi. They want to cover their tracks.
Please, finish.
When?
Tell me. It's my question.
I'm not sure of when you're talking about.
Okay, let's start over.
Yes.
After the timeline was created on February 1st,
Mhm.
at some point thereafter, Carrie Roberts conducted a formal interview with the police about this case, correct?
Okay, you know what? I would say Brennan is not a top attorney in the country. What he's doing is just absolutely trampling on the Constitution. Okay, if you're happy with that, you ought to be very concerned about people having this kind of power and just trying to squash and crush every opportunity you have to present something that's actually the truth. And to deny that is just very, very, very troubling. And so it's not that there is some fear, yeah, because you got somebody going rogue. This doesn't even want you to have a fair trial. That's going against constitutional case law, constitutional principles, and just wants that win no matter what. So, and think about the money he's making. Why would they hire a special prosecutor? It makes no sense. There's something else going on here. So if you're happy with him, you you have no idea. You have no idea how fast this country could go in the hole.
Do you have the report of that date?
We're sort of bearing the lead. She did the interview in your living room, ma'am. Right?
There was,
Uh,
on Tuesday, 2 officers came to the house and she sat in the other room and spoke with them.
So, using my question, she did the interview at your house.
Oh, they came to my house to interview me, and she happened to be there. So they asked if they could speak with her also.
Okay. Did she or did she not do an interview at your house?
She did, yes.
That wasn't that hard. You were present for that interview, weren't you?
I was eating dinner.
You were present for the interview, Ms. McCabe,
I was in the house, yes.
and you listened to that interview, didn't you?
No, I did not.
You made sure you gave Carrie Roberts everything she needed for that interview, correct? Quote, everything she might need for that interview, didn't you?
And where is this
Wasn't-
that you're quoting from? Oh, I'm sorry. When you quoted, I thought it was in here. I apologize.
We'll get to it in a second. Did you tell her everything that you wanted her to say?
No, I did not.
Did you in any way attempt to influence her testimony before she gave that interview in your living room?
Absolutely not. Carrie is her own person.
But then you did report her progress to the Albert and McCabe group in that group chat, didn't you?
Can you show me where, please?
Yeah, Harmony, Ricky, you're saying based on my experience, so I think the jury can see this witness is evasive, shady. I mean, they should. I mean, this is like so open and shut. This person's got so much to hide.
Sure. Isn't it true that in a group text with Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, Matt McCabe, you wrote, and this is on page 2159, quote, and we handed Carrie, sorry, and handed phone to Carrie. Remember that?
I see that, yes.
And the very next text is from you telling the group, she's telling him everything in all caps, 2 exclamation points.
Yes.
And then you went on to say at 2:55 p.m., it's basically the same moment, quote, all the stuff, end quote, correct?
Correct.
So when you said a couple of minutes ago that you weren't listening to what she was saying, that was a lie, wasn't it?
We're talking about 2 different interviews. I'm talking about when the officers came to my house and spoke to her there. You're saying that I handed the phone over, so that would be a different interview.
Okay, this is on February 1st at 2:55. I wasn't there. You were there.
Can you imagine going to somebody's house for the interview of a potential murder charge? It wasn't, they didn't make an arrest of Karen initially for murder. It was manslaughter. But doing this all informally like that, it's just something's really fishy. Something's very fishy. Nothing's done to standard, nothing's done to protocol. And you got to ask yourself why, and that alone is reasonable doubt.
She was in your house on February 1st giving an interview to the police, wasn't she?
One day she was there giving an interview to the police.
And while she was there,
But I do not believe it was at 2:55. It was later in the evening. So I think you might have 2 events confused.
so either way, whether she was on the phone with the police or sitting there in your living room with the police, you were listening to her and reporting back to the group. She's telling them everything.
No, it's not.
Why would she be saying she's telling them everything? That makes it sound like she's talking too much, right?
Was giving an interview to the police, wasn't she?
One day she was there giving an interview to the police.
And while she was there,
But I do not believe it was at 2:55. It was later in the evening. So I think you might have 2 events confused.
so either way, whether she was on the phone with the police or sitting there in your living room with the police, you were listening to her and reporting back to the group. She's telling them everything.
No, it's not correct. The one that she did with the police, she did in the other room. And the one she did on the phone, I said, she's telling them everything.
I know.
Because Carrie is an extremely blunt person and she was giving personal feelings about the situation.
What do you
And
care?
I was horrified by it.
To the police.
To the police.
And you're listening.
I heard a statement she said that horrified me.
And then you're reporting it back to the group, weren't you?
That one thing she stated, I reported back to the group. Yes.
So you're listening in on a police interview, correct?
It was a phone call.
One side of it, right?
It was a phone call.
You don't do that. You don't have witnesses getting to listen what other witnesses are saying. It allows them to get their stories synchronized. They're allowed to compare notes and basically come up with the best story. So it allows people to lie. What you want to do is separate witnesses. They had time to talk beforehand. You surely don't want them there in a house. Bring them down to the police station, interview them there where you can get it on a recording. None of these things are recorded. Think about it, how we got all these video interviews in the Adelson murder case. We don't have any of that here. And then we got a killed officer. It makes no sense. They got such a huge departure from acceptable police procedure on investigations, especially one involving a police officer. And so that's what really is disrespectful. when you have a police officer that doesn't even have the basic rudimentary foundations of an investigation to try to show who committed this act of violence against him.
You're listening in on a police interview, one side of it, correct?
Correct.
You're eavesdropping on that interview, correct?
I'm sitting with her and she's taking the call.
And then you're reporting that interview back, or her success in that interview, in your mind, back to the group involving Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Matt McCabe. Isn't that what you're doing?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I absolutely not. That is not how
Oh.
it went. I was horrified because Kerry's a blunt person, not like me. And she had made a comment about Miss Reed and Mr. O'Keefe's relationship. And I was shocked and horrified that she said it the way that she did.
You're so shocked and horrified
I
that
said, oh my God, she's telling them everything. Yes.
you decided it was so important to you to report that back to Brian Albert and his friends.
I was horrified.
So you reported that back.
Yes, I said she told them everything.
When you were first confronted with these messages at a separate proceeding in June of 2023, you claimed that you couldn't remember what that exchange was about, correct?
Correct.
And now you just all of a sudden have this newfound memory of exactly what that text message was referring to, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Yes, because Kerry Roberts
Overruled.
said a statement and it jogged. I said, oh my God, that's what I meant when I said she said everything.
When did she say this statement?
Sorry.
Probably in the fall. She has made this statement a few times in reference to Karen.
You and Kerry Roberts are still coordinating your statements together.
Oh, no, we're not. It's just an opinion she has of Miss Reed.
And all of a sudden that became your, quote, everything, all this stuff.
It didn't just become it. I forgot that I had written it. And one day Kerry made the statement, and I'm sure it happens to everyone. You forget something and then you're like, oh my God, that's what it was.
I'm not sure that happens to everyone.
Objection.
Sustained.
Let me ask you a different question. When you were asked under oath
Mhm.
a year ago,
Mhm.
when it was things were fresher in your mind, you were asked specifically what what you were referring to, and your answer was, I have no idea, correct?
Correct.
Because you didn't want to tell them that you had coordinated your statement with Kerry Roberts. Isn't that right?
No, that is not right. I did not remember what it was.
Went on to be asked specifically, do you know who you were referring to? And you said, maybe Kerry, maybe. I'm talking to Kerry. And the question was, but you don't recall this text? And your answer was, I don't remember. That's what you testified to a year ago, correct?
Correct.
But now you're talking about some
Okay.
memory.
Okay, Jill Argos, I'm not going to let you promote this, Brennan. What he's doing is an absolute disgrace. It's disgusting. And if you're going to be here and prop him up, just get off the channel, okay? I don't need to have people like you insulting the Constitution, okay? I don't care which side I'm on, prosecution or defense. It's the Constitution is not going to be trampled. And for you to sit there and say somebody's ranked top 100 or whatever, those things you can buy entry into, okay? Those are all just like little clubs and stuff like that, okay? So it doesn't matter what he's ranked at, okay? And what is he, a defense lawyer of sorts? He should know the Constitution better than anybody else. So anyway, I deleted your comment. So I don't need to hear that propaganda here, okay?
of a disparaging comment that Kerry Roberts has about my client. And that's the everything in your mind.
Yes, the things that she was saying.
Quite obviously, what you were referring to in that text in real time, Ms. McCabe, was that Kerry Roberts was telling the police, quote, everything that you had laid out for her in this timeline meeting you had with her, correct?
Objection.
So it's sustained as to that form. You can ask that question in a proper way.
The everything you referred to in that text in real time was what you had worked out with Kerry in that timeline meeting, wasn't it? That was the everything you were referring to, correct?
Incorrect. We never worked together to come up with a story. We have the facts, and the everything was a comment about your client.
You went on in your group chat with Brian Albert, Nicole Albert, and Matt McCabe to give running updates.
You know, I'll just say this. I got a theory about prosecutors. The worst prosecutors to go against, the ones that don't understand the Constitution and just use the courtroom as a chance for personal vendettas and agendas that have nothing to do with the law and the facts. I noticed that those that have never done sports growing up, and team sports especially, those are the worst prosecutors I've ever dealt with. They're the absolute worst, and they have no sense of doing anything. But it's like they're trying to inflict pain they had growing up on society, and they gloat and cheer on their efforts to bring people down. And it's not even a matter whether they're guilty or innocent. It's all a matter of how many convictions, how many years imprisonment can you get on people's life? And it's very sick, okay? So, and as I've said on my channel, from my experience, I've seen the full gamut where you got absolute ruthless prosecutors that don't look at the Constitution, don't care about the Constitution, don't care about any rights afforded there. They'll do everything they can to get a conviction. It doesn't matter whether the conviction will stand or not. And then you have the other extreme where prosecutors are weak, they're pathetic, they don't do what's necessary to prosecute the case, and guilty people get away with stuff right and left because the people like that are too weak. All right, so you have everything in between as well. So anyway, I'm calling it like it is, and so I'm not going to sit here and listen to something like that. So anyway, I'm sorry I'm getting off script here, but yeah, it is very angry. I took an oath to defend the Constitution, and seeing garbage like this going on in a courtroom just makes my blood boil. Okay, so these people have no business being in a courtroom discussing the Constitution. Okay, so that's my 2 cents
About whether or not Kerry Roberts was actually following the script, correct?
Incorrect. There was no script.
167. Matt McCabe texted the group, Brian, sitting separate, end quote, correct?
Yes.
Sounds like Matt McCabe is
This case is garbage. This court is garbage from what I've seen, and I don't expect it to get better. I think it's going to continue to get worse and worse. So if they get a conviction against Karen Reed for any kind of murder charge, it is completely because they hijacked and suppressed the truth. Okay, a courtroom for the prosecution should be about the truth. The defense is the one, if they know the truth is against their client, will be trying to do stuff to blur the lines, create doubt and confusion with the jury. But the prosecution, if they've resorted to that level of trying to do smoke and mirrors and hiding the ball and stuff like that, we're no better off than any other country in the world that just has basically a star chamber and you're presumed guilty, okay, with no chance of a jury. It's over and done. Anybody can be a target, and you can be brought down by a machine like this that just absolutely just crushes people and the Constitution. The Constitution is nothing. It's just a throwaway, burnable piece of paper, okay?
reporting back to Brian Albert, following the instructions, we're sitting separate.
Objection.
Sustained.
1 minute later, Brian Albert had a one-word response to the Brian sitting separate, correct?
Yes.
What was that one-word response?
Okay.
So it sounded like he was giving his approval for where people were situated in that meeting, correct?
Objection.
Sustained.
At page 2168, 515.
It's very hard to just look at two texts and try to understand what the context is.
Mr. McCabe, if you don't understand the question that I have, just let me know, but otherwise let me ask the question. On page 2168, at 515, you wrote the group, quote, "You listening?" Correct?
Yes.
And at the same time, 515, you then wrote, "Cops here again," end quote, correct?
Correct.
That was in reference to the police coming over to your house to further interview Kerry Roberts, wasn't it?
That was when they
Timeline.
came to talk to me.
Would
And
really help.
Kerry Roberts was there.
Was at my house, correct?
And a few minutes later at 523, Nicole Albert texts, "Call us after," correct?
Correct.
And a few minutes after that, Matt McCabe texts, quote, "This girl could write a book, ... nonstop," correct?
Correct.
So obviously Matt McCabe, along with you, was listening to Kerry Roberts in her interview.
We were sitting in the kitchen eating dinner with our children, and Carrie Roberts was in a different room, but she was going on and on and on
How do you
as
know?
she does because they were in the other room.
And you could listen.
I could hear voices.
You could hear her interview with the
Did
police.
not hear her interview. I could hear them talking, but I was sitting at a table with my children eating dinner, getting ready to go to a basketball game.
You then responded to Matt McCabe.
That whole scene that you're next door trying to get your kids ready for a basketball game. Why would you even be paying attention? Why wouldn't you let them have privacy? Why is the interview in your house? This is so bizarre. It wasn't meant to be a legitimate investigation.
I love it.
Yes.
And then you responded about this interview. You just testified under oath and under penalty of perjury, not hearing anything about, just hearing voices. Your next text was, quote, "She is telling them everything,"
Yes.
end quote, correct?
Yes.
So what you said just a few minutes ago about not knowing what she was saying, I could just hear voices, that was a lie.
It was.
Objection.
Sustained.
And a couple of
Sham.
seconds later,
Garbage.
Nicole Albert responds, one word. What was her response?
Good.
So in order, those texts say, you listening? You say, you listening?
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection sustained.
At the end of the day,
Of
you
course.
were eavesdropping
Just keep
on an
objecting.
interview that Kerry Roberts was having with law enforcement in their official capacity.
No, I was sitting eating dinner, and some of the things, obviously, I overheard, but I was not eating. I'm saying there's a possibility if I'm sitting in this room eating dinner and someone's in another room talking, you can hear bits and pieces. Was I eavesdropping? No. Is there some big cover-up story? No.
Well, why, Ms. McCabe, does your testimony keep evolving? A second ago, you said, you told this jury, you said, I couldn't hear a thing. All I could hear was voices, like muffled voices from the other room. She's going on and on about something.
Yeah.
And then when I confronted you with the text message where you said, she's telling them everything, now it's, well, I may have heard a couple of things. Which is,
No, she was going on, and
I mean, this is so damning for a witness to be trying to get a timeline together, trying to make sure that she's reporting to others what's going on. They all were communicating with each other what's going on. Why would she be worried about it? So what if she's telling them everything? What's the big deal? Who cares? It makes no sense other than the fact that you guys are all comparing notes on what police questions are being asked, and you're trying to compare notes and see exactly how the investigation's going. Why would you be so concerned about it? Why is it such a big concern?
and on, like she does.
and you were listening on and on and on like you do.
I was probably hearing bits and pieces.
Why was it so important to report back to the group that you were happy that Kerry Roberts was saying, quote, everything?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Overruled, Judge. Come on.
We had both lost our friend. Kerry Roberts was in shock, as was I in shock. The two of us had all this information that just kept coming back to us and back to us. And it's terrifying when you go through an experience and you're in shock. And Kerry was remembering things. I was remembering things. So I was happy for her that she was piecing it all together, and I had pieced it all together, because at the end of the day, our friend was dead and we were trying to figure out what had happened to him together. There was no direction. We were all trying to figure out what had happened, because that's what you do when you lose somebody you love.
Oh, really? Okay. Well, you had a detective there in your house as well, come over to your house. That is proper police procedure, showing concern for the deceased? I don't think so. This is all reeking of get your story straight, keep to the timeline, keep to the script, and we don't want to have any cracks. So this is what happens when people are worried about what somebody else says. Who cares what Kerry says? Let her have her talk. So it's all because Proctor wanted to make it Albert friendly. Everything has to be Albert friendly here and McCabe friendly.
Were you happy for her, or were you happy for you and Brian and Matt and Nicole?
For me and for her, because we were going through this together. There was no conversation.
You got the story out that you're trying to get out through Kerry Roberts. Right?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
There is no story. There's facts and truth on this side. There's no story. The story that you've created is not the truth.
Did I create, I hit him, or did you?
That's fact.
A fact that conveniently you didn't mention in your report.
I'm going to slow this to regular time.
A blank?
There is no story. There's facts and truth on this side. There's no story. The story that you've created is not the
Wow.
truth.
Did I create, I hit him?
That is so combative. The way she's pushing back at him. Look at how mad she is. You don't really see this of witnesses. And so this ought to really get jurors' attention. The fact that she is this riled up about it. And I mean, he's not even going after her. Like, he's not raking over the coals or anything. He's just asking pointed questions. He's not very loud about it. I mean, I would be probably really loud on a lot of this stuff. And so she's not getting raked over the coals at all. like it could be. So, but he's doing a good job of showing all these inconsistencies, all these contradictions, all these, this, as he calls it, collusion going on. And that's exactly what any jury should pick up on. And so the question is, why are they colluding?
Am I him, or did you?
That's fact.
A fact that conveniently you didn't mention in your report. A blank, grand jury, right? That kind of fact.
Objection.
Okay, so he just rehashed the fact that she's never said this in all those locations where she's saying Jen is saying, I hit him. So she's embellishing it before the trial. So if that's not an indicator that somebody's not there to tell the truth. And so what do we have? Lally, of course, objecting when he rolls all these things up. And what do you think this judge is going to do?
Is that right?
That is the fact I mentioned. So in some reports, it's there.
No, it's not.
The fact is, you wanted to keep very close tabs on Carrie Roberts, didn't you?
No.
On January 29th,
Well, that's what her
you
action.
look on page 2223, did you text the group, quote, Carrie talked to cops and kept it simple, end quote.
Yes.
That's true.
Okay, it's becoming a habit for you to keep tabs on Carrie Roberts, isn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
I'm going to back that up.
It's simple, end quote.
Yes.
Okay, it's becoming a habit for you to keep tabs on Carrie Roberts, isn't it?
Objection.
Sustained.
I couldn't hear the question good enough.
You'll agree that over
Sustained.
and over and over and over again, you're reporting to this tight group, Nicole, Brian Albert, your husband, how Carrie's doing in her stories to the police, aren't you? Over and over and over.
I am telling them what is going on. I wouldn't say it. Well, let's count them. Was there 4 of them? You're saying over and over and over and over. It's a bit extreme.
I see. So you take issue with the way that I phrase over and over and over.
Well, it's misleading, I believe.
I see. Okay. Well, let me see if I can try this in a non-misleading way, Mrs. McCabe.
Okay.
So at least one of us, I'll withdraw. You consistently reported back to the group how Carrie Roberts was doing with the police, didn't you?
I would update them after Carrie saw and spoke to the police. Again, we were all trying to figure out what had happened to John.
There's yet another text from Brian's wife, Nicole, on January 29th, and this is on page 2226. And she says, quote, we'll get more info tomorrow. Don't want to text about it, end quote.
I didn't cover the hearings. I think I'm going to cover that Sunday night, and it's just so disgusting to see what's been going on in court. I'm going to probably cover that Sunday
And
night.
then you texted, right, correct?
Correct.
What's that about?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
Overruled.
We decided that we would talk on the phone. My children look on my phone. Her children look on her phone. We were working with the police. I was sharing information and everything that had happened. We didn't want it to leave our little circle because we were trying to figure out what happened, and we're not going to go running around letting people see, oh my gosh, they think this might have happened or that.
Wait a minute. These people, you're talking about the police officers investigating this case. You're talking about Trooper Proctor, who's connected to the Alberts. This is so unbelievable.
That might have happened. It was nothing more than let's not text about it.
So you wanted to keep it, in your words, in your little circle, correct?
Correct. I didn't want it all out there, what we had thought had happened. I was going to let the police do their job.
So by definition, the info that Nicole Albert was talking about, that needed to be kept very tight, very secret, correct?
We needed the police to do their job. So we weren't going,
Texts, and Nicole wanted her texts, and the group wanted their texts to be kept secret and private. Isn't that right?
not secret and private. We just weren't going to communicate certain things over text.
Did you give, or did anybody give you any private information the next day on January 30th?
Didn't even give me private information.
So let me put it in context. That text from Nicole Albert, we'll get more info tomorrow. I don't want to text about it. That was on the 29th, right?
Okay.
So did you get additional info on the 30th, the next day?
I have no idea.
Did anything significant happen on January 30th in connection with this
The end
case?
here, so I'm gonna keep going.
Any meetings, any get-togethers,
I-
anything that you can think of?
I went to the O'Keefe's house.
Other than that, anything else?
On the way home, Kerry Roberts' daughter is good friends with Michael Lank. So we dropped her off at Michael Lank's house, and Mike's wife came out of the house. Him and Kerry are friends, and she, jumped in the car and was consoling Kerry and asked how the O'Keefes were doing. And, we talked to her.
So you pulled up to Michael Lank's house on the 30th. That's never been reported, has it?
I guess I never thought much of it.
Never thought about reporting the fact that one of the first responding officers on the case, working for Canton PD, which is considered off the case, you had a meeting with, it was unreported the next day?
I didn't meet with Michael Lank.
I see. So you pulled up in the car. Tell me about that again. You pulled up in the car. What happened?
And Lex, her daughter, went into the house.
Okay. And then you just drove away?
When she talks about this being so upset about them being upset about John's death, they're just trying to figure it out. What happened, all this kind of curiosity. It's like, I would probably be sitting there saying, weaving in periodically, yeah, you never went to the funeral, if that's the case for this witness. So she's trying to make this out to be such a big deal. Did she go to the funeral? Can somebody clarify that for me or not? I can't recall for this witness. As I understand, none of them went to the funeral service.
No, Michael's wife came out of the house.
Okay. And y'all had a conversation about what?
She got in the car, and her and Kerry are friends, and she was checking on Kerry and, just saying, oh my God, this is so crazy, just checking in on the O'Keefes.
How long did that take?
Well, Kerry's a talker, so could have been an hour.
Could have been hours standing outside,
Sitting in the car.
sitting in the car on February 30th. Never came in the house?
Not February 30th.
I said February 30th, January 30th. Never went in the house?
I might have ran in to go to the bathroom.
It's the back end of a blizzard. It's freezing cold outside.
Mhm.
Sitting in the car for an hour.
The car was running, Kerry, and they were talking. It's her friend.
Did you have any conversation before your testimony today with anybody about you going to Michael Lank's house on January 30th? Anybody?
Yes,
Tell me about that. Who was it and when?
it was a couple of weeks ago at the DA's office.
The DA's office had an interview with you, correct?
Not an interview. They just explained this process.
I mean, a conversation. How about that?
Yes.
You met with folks at the DA's office. Who'd you meet with?
Mr. Lally, Ms. McLaughlin, Steve Nelson, Trooper Brian Tully, I believe, and another woman, I can't remember her name, unfortunately.
Someone from the DA's office?
Yes.
Beelan?
No.
Lynn Beelan?
No, she's here today. She works with Steve Nelson.
But an employee of the DA's office?
Yes.
It sounds like a pretty big meeting.
I wouldn't call it a big meeting. There was, 5 of them?
How long did you, 5 of them and then you?
My daughter Allie came with me also.
The meeting's getting bigger. Anybody else?
No, we both went.
Was Allie in the room when you were, I was going to say interviewed, but you take issue with every word I use. When you were talked to by the DA?
Allie and I were both in the room when they went over everything, how this all works, because this is all brand new to us. And then they asked me to leave the room.
You were about to say, and I lost the end of that sentence, when they received what?
I didn't mean the word received.
Did you receive anything?
No, I looked at my grand jury notes.
Now, at this meeting, was anybody taking notes?
No.
You have a bunch of lawyers and DAs, and nobody has a notepad in front of them, like notes?
I believe Mr. Lally had a number of folders on the table.
Taking notes?
I do not believe anyone was taking notes. It was a casual meeting to explain this process.
Was that meeting recorded in any way that you're aware of?
No.
How long did the meeting last?
Yeah, I don't know.
Allie and I were probably in the room, I don't know, approximately 20 minutes. Then I left and they spoke with her. And then I went back in and they spoke with me.
How long did they speak with you?
Honestly, maybe half hour.
And during that half hour to an hour, did they go over with you what they expected your testimony to be?
They never spoke about what they expected my testimony to be. They just showed me some pictures that might be shown. I listened to the 911,
What pictures?
just of the house and how I'd be asked to, show, okay, we're going to put a picture of the house and I'll have a laser.
Okay, when we started this conversation, it was because you said, in answer to my question, was anything ever brought up to you about this meeting at Lank's house?
Mhm.
You said yes.
Mhm.
So obviously they did talk to you about your testimony. It wasn't just about the process, correct?
I asked what discovery had been turned in regard to me.
So you wanted to prepare to make sure that you knew what you might be asked on cross-examination, correct?
I wanted to know what was coming. Yes.
And you knew that one of the things was coming after this meeting. Well, let me ask it a different way. During this meeting, did Mr. Lally tell you one of the things that's going to be coming is you had an off-the-books meeting at Lank's house for 45 minutes? Did he tell you that?
No, that's not how I was told.
Did he tell you that the defense had uncovered a report that established that you were actually at Michael Lank's house for 45 minutes that had never been reported to the defense or the prosecution before the phone extraction had been done? Did he tell you that?
I was asked, oh, were you at Michael Lank's on the 30th?
So you've had a lot of time to come up with a story about why you were at Michael Lank's, correct?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
I didn't need time to make up a story because I have the truth of why we went.
And the truth, according to you, is you pulled up at Michael Lank's house. The first responding officer and friends of the Alberts had a meeting with him the next day that was never reported to anybody for any purpose.
I
Just met with his wife
That's
out in the car while the car was running for 45 minutes to an hour. That's your story.
It's not a story. It's the truth. Carrie dropped her daughter off. The wife came out. Carrie is a talker. They started talking. A tragedy had happened the day before.
It is interesting, would you not agree, that the day before you have this off-the-books meeting at Michael Lank's house, Nicole Albert says, we'll get more info tomorrow, meaning the very day you show up at Lank's house.
Again, I never spoke with Mike Lank at his house. It was not an off-the-books meeting. It was Carrie dropping her daughter at one of her good friend's house, whose husband happens to be a Canton cop. That is what it is. That is the truth.
A lot of coincidences. Do you agree?
Objection.
Christine.
Yeah, call me on it.
Yes.
By the way, what did Mr. Lally show you in respect of this issue about this meeting at Michael Lank's house?
He showed me nothing.
He just told you about it.
Brian Tully told me.
Okay, what did Mr. Tully tell you? Trooper Tully, what exactly did he tell you at this meeting about this Michael Lank issue?
He said, did you go to Michael Lank's on January 30th? And at first I said, no, I've never been to his house. And then I thought about it and I said, oh my gosh, yes, I did go there. And that was the extent of the conversation.
You said, yeah, I did go there, and he didn't ask a follow-up, like, what the heck were you doing at Michael Lank's house the day after this issue?
Objection.
I'll allow it.
He didn't ask a follow-up like that?
I do not believe he did.
So Trooper Tully, had you come down for an interview, he confronted you
thank you.
with a fact that had never been disclosed before, to wit, you showed up at Michael Lank's house, and when you said, yeah, oh yeah, hang on, I think your words were, oh my gosh, yeah, I think I did go there. And he didn't ask a follow-up question?
He was there. You're You're spinning all of this.
Ma'am, I do a lot of things.
Yeah.
I don't spin. There's a judge here to make sure that I don't spin. I'm asking you a question. It's very direct.
I do not believe he asked me a follow-up question.
So that was the end of that conversation about Michael, correct?
Correct.
Mr. Lally didn't have any follow-up questions?
I don't believe Mr. Lally was in the room.
Who else? I thought you said Mr. Lally and Mr. McLaughlin.
They were. They might not have been in the room at that time.
I see. So Mr. Lally just happened to, what, just saunter out?
It was a different time.
So Mr. Lally was in and out of the conversation?
Mr. Lally was not there when this conversation happened
Well, why is that?
because I met with Brian Tully and he was not there.
Is Brian Tully taking notes?
No,
He's a state trooper interviewing a witness and
he was
Objection.
Sustained.
That's relevant.
The same report that has you at Michael Lang's house
Mhm.
also has you picking up Nicole Albert going by 34 Fairview.
Talks about how basically the police investigation, I guess if it's preparing for trial, you don't always take notes, but a good chance to get stuff memorialized if it wasn't before. So I'd be curious to see the actual file that was turned over to the defense. It's probably so sketchy, just a few little notes here and there by Proctor, and then they stick a bow on it and say we're done, and Karen's fighting for her life. So
Just before you went to Michael Lang's house. You aware of that?
we did not pick up Nicole Albert.
So you went by 34 Fairview, didn't divert in. And right after you went by 34 Fairview, went directly over to Michael Lang's house. What was the reason to stop by 34 Fairview first?
We didn't stop by. Maybe Carrie slowed down, but we did not stop by 34.
So you drove by, did a drive by 34 Fairview. Giggles? What?
Nope, that's how we get to Michael Lang's house.
If the report shows that you actually stopped at 34 Fairview, and then went to Michael Lang's house, would we have another oh my gosh moment?
Nope, no oh my gosh moment. We did not pick up Nicole Albert.
Did anybody else go with you over to Michael Lang's house?
No, it was Carrie, myself, and her daughter.
Your Honor, maybe briefly.
Okay.
okay, I think that's about it. Let me double check. Why does it jump all the way there? All right, hold on.
If you interacted with, by the way, you'll agree that the phone extraction showed that John O'Keefe got no voicemails from you, right?
I didn't look, but
Because it takes several iterations of movement to get a phone open, Face ID or password, right?
correct.
So when you hit the button by mistake, walk away, that's a butt dial. People call butt dials. What happens with the call?
Here.
I assume it goes to voicemail.
It's a good assumption, because that's exactly what it does, isn't it? You had a phone for a lot of years, right?
Yes,
It rings and rings and rings until it goes to voicemail.
correct.
So in order to hang up that butt dial, you have to interact with that phone yet again, don't you?
Yes,
So if you had 6 butt dials, 7, I think it's 7 butt dials, you'd not only have to interact with the phone once to butt dial, John, you'd then have to interact with it every single time
What to be? You know what? This is
to
wrong.
turn off that.
Raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear the evidence given in court and jury in the case now and here to the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? so help you?
I do.
All right, whenever you're ready, Mr. J.
All right, well, I think we got the gist of it here tonight. Then I'm going to go ahead and shut this off. I'm making too many clicks on my mouse, so I apologize for that. Sometimes it gets me lost like that, but I'll get better as time goes on here. So anyway, that pretty much is a sum and substance then what you see for Jen McCabe. She's got so much there as a prosecution witness that it's really a gold mine for the defense to have her testify, because it really, so many things she says is really as indicator that there's something else going on. I know the defense is saying they came out and said that the 3 people responsible for John O'Keefe's death are the folks inside that home, the 3 men inside the home. And so the bottom line is this is, they don't have to prove that is actually how it happened. All they have to do is bring out evidence to indicate that there's lies, deceptions, and motives of folks. And so I think what they're going to say is something went down and went down really fast. There's also some indicators that, why was there such a great interest in John O'Keefe showing up to his house when they didn't really know him. So, but I would say that they don't really need to know all the details, how it was done and who did it. Just pointing the finger at somebody when there are some indicators based on their behavior that something fishy is going on is enough. And but whether that defense is allowed this next go round remains to be seen. But I'm just very concerned about the optics of this case and how the Constitution is being trampled on. So I'll cover more of those court motions and stuff like that. I plan on doing that Sunday night. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see y'all back here most likely Sunday night then. So have a great weekend. Take care. Be safe.